The 2011 Sundance film Bellflower is a really special film. It's about a love story gone wrong, and it's a film that I think more people should check out. But what makes this film even more unique is that it was shot using a custom-made cinema camera. And I want to talk about why that's so important. Now, the custom camera is called the Colt Model 2, and it was designed by the filmmaker and director Evan Glodell. He's a craftsman. I mean, a lot of the props and especially the signature car, Medusa, in the film, he modified and built. And the brain is basically a silicon imaging Si2K camera, which was an early cinema camera back in the 2000s and even the late 2010s that filmmakers would use. I believe famously Danny Boyle shot Slumdog Millionaire on this camera, and there's a ton of other films that were shot using this camera. The mini version is basically this very small brain-like camera that outputs 12-bit 2K, which in the early 2000s was mind-blowing. So he basically started with that as the brain, as the base. And what he did from there was have this camera be shooting on a large focusing plane, which then had a lens in front of it. So back in the day, there was these things called 35mm adapters, and they were essentially this device that allowed you to get shallow depth of field on your camera, because early video cameras had very, very tiny sensors, so you didn't get that beautiful shallow depth of field. So what these adapters would essentially do is have a focusing screen from a DSLR, and you essentially would be filming this focusing screen that would allow you to put like a 35mm or any type of focal length lens in front of it to have that shallow depth of field. You're essentially like filming a screen projecting a image from a lens on it. So you did lose light and there were loss in quality because it's not directly from lens to sensor, you're actually having this stopgap in between. From what I gathered that he did, he essentially took a large focusing screen, like a large medium format focusing screen. So instead of the small sensor that the silicon Si2K came with, it was a large format effect essentially in the camera. What's great about the cinematography in the film is that Evan essentially broke a lot of the rules that they teach you not to do in cinematography. Like make sure your lenses are clean, make sure the sensor's clean, make sure to have accurate skin tones. All of these rules were just broken. I mean, you essentially see dirt and grime on the lens and the focusing plane, and essentially he intended for that. He wanted that to be part of it. It's really interesting, the approach to camera in this particular film, because it's not just a tool that they use to capture the film, but it feels like a character in the film itself. You get a lot of this grit and grime, to it, to the characters, and the camera is no different, and it felt perfect for this story that they were telling, especially these really strong yellow tones. But they did it for an effect, and I think that effect was accomplished. Now, let me talk about why this film is so important, and films like it are really important. Nowadays when you read filmmaking articles about like the top cameras that were used in Sundance films or Cannes films, you always see the Arri Alexa, the Arri Alexa Mini, the Arri Alexa LF, RED occasionally, and sometimes you'll see Canon or Sony there, but most of the time you'll either see the Arri, and I think that's so incredibly boring. It's really kind of sad that we're just going to these Arri cameras when we have so many tools to choose from. I understand the argument that in bigger productions they need something that was absolutely reliable with time code and certain things that large productions need. I understand that. But on a smaller scale, on the indie scale, why are we gravitating toward these Arri Alexas when we don't have the budget for that, but we also have the opportunity to make something look special and unique? Even on the large scale cameras, something like the Sony Venice that isn't used nearly as much as the Arri Alexa, I think really creates beautiful images. And I think Darren Aronofsky's The Whale used it to great effect, especially seeing it be used in that apartment and having this dark but not pitch dark looking image. Hard to describe, but I think the Sony Venice did a wonderful job on that film, and it just goes down the list. Even something like Midsommar, which used that Panavision camera that's like a mix between RED and Panavision. There are so many different cameras, and back to Sundance, a lot of people talk about Sean Baker's Tangerine and how he utilized the iPhone and how that created such a unique look. Or even a film like Under the Skin that shot with these custom tiny cinema cameras to film under the radar with actress Scarlett Johansson. More recently, there's even a film called The Creator, which is directed by Gareth Edwards, who's done Rogue One, Monsters, and he shot on the Sony FX3, which is this very small camera. And from what he's been saying is that this camera allowed him to shoot with basically no lighting, with just having an LED pointed at the actors. And that's what's great, is that when the camera essentially also gets out of the way of the filmmakers, that's when you're actually serving the audience and not, the fancy camera. Essentially what I'm getting at is that there's so many beautiful cameras out there, and when we just keep going back to the same well with these cameras, especially on the indie level, it's just boring, and there's so much more we capture, so much more beauty we can capture with these lesser known brands or the less utilized brands that was just waiting. It's just waiting to be discovered. Again, there's nothing wrong, and I'm not here to say that Arris are bad. They're definitely not. They're still the gold standard, or Reds are bad, or anything like that. It just be open-minded if you have the opportunity to think about what camera you're going to shoot on. Just be open-minded about what's out there, because there's so many great cameras that are out there. And if you have any interest in watching Bellflower, I have an affiliate link down below. Just go make some really interesting images with some underutilized cameras.